So firstly, just introduce yourself, like your name, school, uni degree, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Meckel. I graduated from Wesley College, St. Kilda Road in 2023 last year.
Yeah.
And I'm currently studying the Bachelor of Commerce at Melbourne Uni. Intending to major in probably finance marketing, but I haven't decided yet. And just some things about me. I guess I am quite multicultural and had a very multicultural upbringing in terms of and I lived in many 5-6 countries by the age of 15. And yeah, I'm 19 years old. Do you want anything else?
No, that's all great.
Very cool.
Actually, can you tell your ATAR as well, just so we could use it as
I got a 98.15 ATAR, I believe.
Great. Okay, so first of all, how are you really able to juggle between classes and other responsibilities in your year 12?
In year 12, within the IB diploma, it was quite difficult to juggle between your IAs and your assessments just throughout the year and also studying for exams. But I guess what I did was, what worked for me was prioritization and realizing what was the kind of assessment was of utmost importance and dedicating the majority of my time towards that assessment to ensure that I was able to kind of break down and actively manage and plan where I was kind of going to, like, what my outlook would be like for the future and how I would best kind of manage that stress. But additionally, what was also very helpful was just making sure that taking the time before the assessment was due to plan and make actual kind of study plans for that specific assessment so I could dedicate short amount of time every day rather than cramming it into one sort of like night before, 2 nights before. It would just ease my mind 100%, and it just made it so much easier for me to ensure that I was able to just do something without the constant stress of like the deadline approaching within like the idea.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of building off that a bit, did you prioritize some classes over others, like in the build up towards exams?
I would say I was lucky enough to already have a sufficient understanding of Spanish before I completed Spanish ab initio due to me living in South America before coming to Australia. So I did, I guess you could say, I would never say, I guess, like, prioritize subjects over another, but I would dedicate more time to subjects than others. But that's solely based on my strengths. So in terms of, I would just what I did was I kind of gave my 6 subjects and gave myself, I guess, like a rating. And I would, of each subject of confidence, and I would start with the one of lowest confidence and attempt to build that up to the levels of the other subjects. And then from there, once all of them reached the same, I would choose some others to bump up. However, the majority of my time was spent on STEM subjects. So that's chemistry and mathematics, just because those were kind of the most content heavy and ones that I found, I guess, the most just difficult during my time within the IB.
Yeah, it's a pretty common answer that a lot of the STEM subjects were the ones that were quite the most demanding in those final few weeks. So you also talked about this, about like how you used to do little bits every day. Well, how did you really set up your time management on like a daily basis?
So my time management on a daily basis, good question. I believe that the majority of my day was taken up with school. I'd usually get home, I'd wake up 8 a.m. and get home at around 4:35-ish. So usually I kind of came home at around 5 p.m. and I'd give myself around 30 minutes, just relax and deload from the day. And then I'd set myself out a plan that would allow me to kind of break out my study into intervals. I'll admit this wasn't exactly how it was across the whole of my IB diploma. It was more kind of heavily focused within year 12 when I started to actually dedicate my time into specific portions and like actually focus on planning and studying consistently after school every day. However, when I did, it was mostly broken up into 1-hour intervals of subjects that I wanted to work on for the day. And I would usually just, I guess I would kind of identify the subjects I want to work on through just, once again, my confidence within the subject and how I felt I was, what level I was at approaching an assessment or an examination. However, especially for like, I guess, math and chemistry, if there was an assessment coming up, I would prioritize study for those subjects. And but all other subjects, it kind of just depended on what was coming up and how confident I was within that subject.
So now moving on to note taking, is there a particular way in which you would take notes for a subject? Is like a specific way you would build out on a page or whatever?
Yeah, 100%. So within and also carrying into university as well, just within year 12 and university, something that I've really kind of learned to work with is that usually you can get caught in a trap of taking every single note on the page. And that's what I guess my economics teacher really kind of forced. He was a great teacher, by the way, but in class, he would always kind of get us to take every note. And I think although that is beneficial, if the teacher sends you the slides, there is no real benefit to taking every single note because you do have access to the exact same words just on a different page. So I'd say I would recommend understanding every single note, but then after class or even during class, take away key points and make summary sheets after each lesson, which will give you those kind of key ideas that you want to actually hold on to. Because in processing just infinite amounts of information, because you are processing a lot during the IB, there's a lot of 2 years of content, there's a lot to learn. So I really just delegate that into its specific sections and the important parts within each section. And then once you've kind of got those basics and the foundations down, then you can kind of explore into those more niche. And just also, it's very, very important, I guess, within year 12 and within the IB to look at the subject guide and see exactly what the course demands from you and what they will be quizzing you on, because you do have that information and your teachers will provide you with that. So in allowing yourself to kind of understand exactly what you will be tested on at the end of the year, you can adequately prepare yourself and make sure that your notes are sufficient for that. And the same thing as in university. It's when I get up to my exams, it's the exact same. I make a summary sheet and then I quiz myself on questions, active recall, making sure that I'm understanding exactly what the notes are and what's expected of me for the exam.
Building off that as well, what tasks really would you complete the most leading up to exams? We talked about active recall, talked about summary sheets. Is there anything else that you really would build up on before exams?
So I really, I have a very strong methodology when it comes to kind of building up to exams. And I'd say roughly 4 weeks out, a month out, or I'd say maybe even a bit more for IB. But just for IB, I'd recommend around a month and a half, 2 months. And around that 2-month mark before you hit exams, you really want to start creating those summary sheets and making sure that before you quiz yourself on past exams, you want to make sure that you have the adequate knowledge to correctly answer the questions. Because my biggest pet peeve when I see students answering past exams and not actively learning from those past exams, because the past exams are very, very, very important resources. So, and they're scarce. There's not infinite amounts of past exams. So therefore, you want to ensure that after every exam and before you take an exam, you are up to date with the knowledge that will be assessed. Because if you're not consistently, I guess, I tell all my students, after every exam, after every question you get wrong, write it in a separate document and answer it. So then the next time it comes up, you will have sufficient information to allow yourself to not be kind of, I guess, be unable to answer that question again. So you're just consistently learning and growing. So I'd say build yourself a foundation before you just go straight into tests and other sort of, I guess, assessments for your subject. And that goes throughout the whole year. Just make sure you have the sufficient knowledge. But a lot of kids rush into practice exams and don't realize that they're an extremely valuable resource that should be kind of, I guess, saved for closer to the exam date. Whereas that's when you're kind of putting yourself in the zone and making sure that you're very comfortable within that exam taking process. So 100% is start off with a summary sheet and start off with ensuring that you're confident within the subject syllabus and with all topics of the subject. And then once you feel like you are confident, take a practice exam and then take a mental note and say, I really fell short in this subtopic of the assessment. And then go back to that section and do more work. You should always be just building. You should never be stagnant within your revision.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I quite got this. What subjects did you do for?
I took higher level English, geography, and economics, and I took standard level math, AA, chemistry, and Spanish ab initio.
Okay, yeah. So for those higher level subjects, how were you able to like recall knowledge for them? Because obviously the higher level, there's more content that you need to revise. Well, even for standard level maths, there's a lot of content that you need to memorize and be able to recall easily in those exam moments and under pressure. So how are you able to do that? What really helps you do that in the exam?
Within the exam, I guess there are very like, and your teacher will tell you this usually, there are very kind of heavy topics within each subject. Not all topics are kind of weighted the same. For instance, in Math AA, which is a standard level, but calculus is a very, very heavily weighted, and you will be using that a lot. Therefore, there are subjects there are, I guess, subtopics which you can prioritize. And I've mentioned that because you're not going to have a equal understanding of every single topic, because it's just not beneficial, because not every topic will be tested equally. So what I'd really recommend is getting that breakdown from your teacher and getting that breakdown to see which subjects are and like look at past exams and see calculus is usually 50% of the math exam, or economics, a big part of it is like aggregate demand and supply. So you want to make sure that you're very, very well versed in those major topics. And then you can kind of, I guess, no, I wouldn't say like lay back or kind of like neglect other portions, but it can get you 75% of the way by knowing those other topics. And then if you only know 50% of the other 25%, you still get 12.5%, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like if you can maximize your marks on the larger topics, you can fall short on some of the other ones and still get a great mark within the subject, because IB does have that leniency where it's not, you don't need 100% to get a 7. If you only need 75, 80%. So therefore, make sure you're very well versed in these foundational kind of concepts and the large topics within your subjects. And then you can focus on the smaller ones and make sure that you're kind of nitpicky with how you go about your revision. But 100% focusing on the foundational subjects is foundational concepts within the subject is the best way to kind of ensure that you're well versed for those exams.
Now, actually, in the exam, how would you structure your approach? So, like, go through what you would do for your average exam.
Well, this is, I do this with all my tutoring students before they come up to exams. And I guess there are many different ways within different subjects. I guess we can break it up into STEM and I guess other. So within STEM, the worst thing, and the thing that happened to me personally in my math exam, was that I was a very, very confident and competent math student. And in my exam, I underperformed according to my expectations. And that was because that I lost, I guess, a mental battle within the exam. And that's because I let a question trip me up, and I let it kind of make me feel like I guess like not very confident in my ability, which had like additional effects throughout the exam, because I was just constantly sitting there and thinking, oh my God, I didn't answer this question, I'm going to mess up the whole exam, and it just ruined my, I guess, like my mental clarity within the exam. So I'd say for your STEM subjects, 100%, all you have to do is the first thing you want to do, enter the exam, start from start to finish, and answer all of the questions that you know. So all the questions that you know, and you know from heart, and you know 100% that they're correct, get them out the way. If there's a question that you are stuck on, I wouldn't say immediately just skip it. Take a second to kind of try and problem solve. But if it's really not coming to you, there's no point in, I guess, sitting there and wasting time when you could be answering other questions within the test that you can get out the way. So answer all of the questions that you know 100%. And then come back and because usually also within the exam, you kind of gain more confidence as you answer the questions that you know, which will lead you to kind of have that better mental clarity when coming back to the initial question that you didn't answer. And that would just honestly boost your score by so much, because you can be confident in what you know. And then when it comes to, I guess, English, because English is the main thing I tutor, when going through an English exam, it's all about planning and just how you go about. So for instance, for the paper 1 exam, you do have 2 papers, and it is a short time frame. You have 2 hours and 15 minutes to write 2, I guess, guided analyses on a text, which is not a lot of time. However, if you break it up into planning stages, for instance, I always tell my students, take 15 minutes of the exam, the first 15 minutes. Don't put pen to paper for any sort of introduction or body paragraphs. Take 15 minutes to plan and really think about, what am I going to write within this essay? How will I structure it? And once you have a structured understanding of what you're going to write, it becomes so much easier, because it's essentially just a fill in the blank at that point. You have your main ideas, and then from there, you just fill in the blank with filler words that makes your ideas just puts your ideas onto the paper. So there are different ways to go about it. However, I just 100% recommend planning and just not focusing on questions that you can answer, but rather maximizing the marks that you can, and then taking that time at the end of the test, once you've answered all the questions that you know, to then come back to those original answers and attempt to kind of maximize the marks. And lastly, also, students often don't understand that a question is worth more than 1 mark. Of course, they understand that, but they don't really actively think about that. I always try, and maximize every mark. Never leave a question blank. Leaving a question blank is just extremely, I guess, like ignorant to the marks that you could gain, because leaving question blank is just, you get 0 marks. And chances are the answer is only worth actually 1 mark. There are 6 working marks before that will lead you to do that. So anything on the paper is better than nothing on the paper. So just, I guess, maintain mental clarity and just build your confidence within the test. The worst enemy of test taking is anxiety and getting nervous. That's what's going to make sure that you underperform, because when you go into an exam, you know your stuff. If you've adequately prepared, you know what you know, and you can't change that. And people often tend to think about things that they didn't do rather than doing what they already know.
So I'll then move on to what types of questions you personally felt difficult, and like what your students found the most difficult, like ones that you constantly get asked.
So in terms of like an actual question within the exam?
Well, just like in general.
Oh, just in general,
like,
just questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so questions I usually get for, okay, so usually like the majority of my teaching is Spanish, it's English. I've done a little bit of math tutoring here and there, but let's just start off, I guess, with questions that I always had. Let me think for a second, because none really come to my head in the beginning. But questions I always asked is always, I guess, a question, and something that I always like kind of always was in the back of my mind was that, I guess, the gravity of the IB distribution of marks and how 80% of the test, 80% of your mark is within the test. And that I was always thinking, what if I mess up? What if I underprepare? What if I mess up this final exam and then 80% of my mark is gone after I've studied for 2 years? And I guess one thing, I guess a big approach to my tutoring is making sure that not only do you actually have the sufficient knowledge, but also having the mental clarity and, I guess, like calmness to actually take the test and apply your knowledge, because that is genuinely a big, all students are smart. However, they just get in their head and it just utterly ruins their mark. And it's just a big confidence thing. So I guess to answer that question, I always say to my students, put yourself in exam conditions when preparing for exams. So massive thing for me, same with my math test. Whenever I was doing practice exams, if I didn't understand exactly what a question meant, or if I wasn't 100% sure on the answer, I'd kind of skim before the end, skim to the mark scheme and see, am I on the right track? Am I doing this? If the answer was yes, then I'd be like, oh, cool. And if it wasn't, then I'd like kind of like look and base myself off the mark scheme, which is just not beneficial, because then I got to the test and there was a question that I didn't know how to start and I wasn't able to skim across to the mark scheme. So I started panicking because I was like, oh my God, I'm not prepared for this. However, if you put yourself completely away from any sort of like aid and put yourself in exam conditions at home, you'll become so much more familiar with how to take and how to actually handle the pressure of the exam. And you get that opportunity because there are so many resources within the IB. When I go to study for my university exams, I start panicking because I'm like, there's only one, I only have 2 past papers. You know what I mean? Like I don't have 50 since 1930s. I have 2 given to me by my university, and then I kind of have to make do from there. So it is such a privilege to have this kind of copious amount of resources that you can always look to. So use them, I guess, use them accordingly and use them to your advantage. So that was a question that I always had, and one that I've come to like know the answer to just off experience, just not only taking the IB, but also in university. And a question that my students always ask is, it's within.
You can be specific if you want as well.
Yeah. I'm just thinking. It'd be most of my questions, I guess, come in English, and they'd honestly all usually, I guess the paper that people usually struggle with is paper 2, which is that comparative essay paper. And many of my students often ask like, how can I compare within like the same paragraph, or how do I structure my paper 2? That's usually one that I always get. How do I structure my paper 2? And it's all about personal preference and what kind of works best for you, but there are kind of like traditional ones that do work. And I guess I've always told them about the introduction. You have that comparative introduction, and then the one that I used, which did score highly in the exam, was having 6 paragraphs and 3 ideas. So having an idea and then 2 paragraphs for separate text, however, comparing and contrasting consistently throughout each paragraph. And that's probably the biggest question that I always get. There are other ones that kind of come to mind, but honestly, the one that I always preach is always that first one that I talked about, is making sure that you're, how do I like, I guess I could ask, like, how do I prepare for my exam? How do I make sure, like, what is it one that I got this year before my students were doing it? What's like a crash? How do I study? That was always one. How do I study properly? And I've always said it heaps in this, I guess, already in this interview, but it's always set yourself, like make it known to yourself where you're sitting at for each subject, and build upon each subject and build upon each concept individually until you have that common strength across all subjects. Prioritize when necessary. Make sure that all your subjects are on the same level, because every subject in IB is worth the same. And I always tell this to my Spanish students, because Spanish and languages are often a subject that is, I guess, overlooked because they think it's a language, it's not as important as math. A 7 in Spanish is the exact same as a 7 in math on your report card. It will contribute to the exact same result. So I'd say people often are unaware of that and kind of think, oh, it'll all be okay because it's just Spanish, or it's just this, I guess, like side subject rather than like the main STEM and like English. However, it's important to just know your strengths and know your weaknesses, and make sure you build on those weaknesses until they become a strength.
Now, looking back on your time in IB, do you have any regrets with any of the choices you made leading up to the exam, or your subject choices, for example? Is there any key regrets that you want to like talk about now?
Well, I just prefaced this before. For my subject selection, I'd say that I really enjoyed my subjects. I think that it really depends. Some people took double science, some people take double. I honestly prefer double humanities. I think that it does provide like a very broad scope. And for me, going into commerce, the choice of like economics and geography, I still utilize them in my day-to-day like uni, I guess like application. Like some of my subjects are very reminiscent to geography. I use a lot of my past knowledge in economics to help me do well in my intro macroeconomics or intro microeconomics in university. However, before, my biggest regret was definitely not, and I said this before, just definitely not using my resources adequately and not putting myself in exam situations when I had the chance. And then so if you can create yourself a mock exam and you have access to mock exams, and you can just put yourself in exam conditions without actually having any sort of pressure, it just prepares you so much for when you actually go into the exam, because it's something that you've done before. It's something that you're familiar with. The more you familiarize yourself with something, the less daunting it will be when you actually take it. So just that, making sure that I guess my biggest regret, just not putting myself in the same conditions that I would be taking the exam in, because that just it just doesn't, it just makes for anxious test taking, and makes for it just reduces once again your mental clarity.
How did you really handle the stress and pressure of year 12? Would you say?
So honestly, I tell this to all my students, and it's a very common experience. I don't know if it's the same for Wesley, other colleges, other schools, but for Wesley, the most, I guess, daunting time of the IB was around term 1, term 2, year 12, when you had math and chemistry and extended essay and talk essay, and also all of your regular assessments for the class. And it just seemed like too much to juggle. And with my students who are finishing year 11 now, going into year 12, I tell them, I know you don't want to do any work in the holidays, but personally me, I finished my extended essay in the year 11 to year 12 holidays. And that was genuinely the biggest blessing and the biggest kind of, I guess, thing that I look back on and I think, yes, I'm thankful I did that, because I was able to knock out my extended essay, the draft. It wasn't even the final. I was still tweaking it across the whole kind of like period, but knocking out the extended essay, just writing, the hardest part, getting started before it was even, I guess, kind of like actively kind of made a priority within the school, just allowed me to manage my time so much better, because the time that I was spending on the EE could now be spent on the talk essay and could now be spent on the math IA and stuff like that. So just planning. If you can, because students don't realize how much time they have and just how much time is wasted when you don't plan. And this honestly goes for a greater thing outside of simply academia. And it's just like, if you plan, your day and if you plan what you want to achieve, it becomes so much more doable because, and this is always something I say, plan quantifiable objectives. It's not just simply good enough to say do math or do English. If you really want to excel, you want to set yourself quantifiable objectives. So complete a math paper 1 or complete math questions 16 to 33. And when you do that, it becomes so much more achievable and you get so much more done because you can see a clear start and end and you can measure your progress and you can measure exactly where you're completing. So it's all about planning within the IB. The moment you stop planning, the moment you let yourself, I guess, I want to say relax because I wasn't extremely stressed throughout the entire progress and you should be able to relax, of course. But the moment you kind of take your eye off the ball and stop planning and stop actually actively thinking about, okay, this is what I'm going to get done today, is the moment things start piling up. And the moment you start to have to get extensions, which goes on to other things. Always try and complete your assessment by the deadline day because the moment you start getting extensions, you get another assignment that's due during that extension period. While you're still working on a previous assignment, you have a new assignment that comes up. You have to constantly be just monitoring your deadlines and just planning quantifiably for exactly what you can do. It's just like with my extended essay, I literally it took me around 6 hours to write my whole first draft because what I did was I sectioned my extended essay out into 4 parts of 1,000 words, and 1,000 words only takes an hour to write. You write that in an exam. So I just sectioned it out and sectioned out into 4 weeks. I did an hour a week. And then which is nothing. It's genuinely nothing. Like, and then when I started year 12, I'd already done it. And it was just like, I don't even remember doing it. It's already just written up for me. So the more you plan within your free time is just the more you will stress less when it actually comes to the assignment. And the more just freedom you will have against your peers, because I know so many of my peers were stressing and were thinking, oh my God, this deadline's coming up. Because they weren't adequately planning exactly what they would do. And I'm not saying dictate every second of your day. So don't go after school and say 5 to 9, I'm going to do like every single day. But like make sure that you're just on top of the ball and you're not letting yourself, I guess, get ignorant.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to university and your time at uni. So you've chosen commerce at Melbourne Uni. What was your process into choosing that degree and the university?
I'd say a big part of it stems from, well, University of Melbourne. Let's just start with my uni decision. I'd wait till you receive your ATAR to really decide. I'd recommend before you receive your ATAR, make a list of the unis and kind of predict with yourself what you're going to get. However, after, use your ATAR and kind of think, okay, where do I want to go? What can I, because essentially all ATAR does is opens more doors. It means that you can go into a higher ATAR course and you can do this. That's all it does. So for instance, me, when I got my ATAR, the entry for commerce is 93. And I was thinking, I got 5 points higher than that. Do I want to use my ATAR for something else? And I was thinking engineering and blah, 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 and other things that kind of require a higher ATAR. And then I thought to myself, honestly, that's not something that I'm passionate in. So always choose something that you are passionate in. I didn't know if commerce was my inept passion and something that I wanted to pursue. However, I knew that in high school, I enjoyed economics and I enjoyed geography and I enjoyed how the world works and how money is made and things like that. So just do what you're passionate about and the results will follow. Because if you're not passionate, you won't be kind of motivated to study, and it becomes so much more difficult to actually kind of choose what course you want to go into and actually succeed in that course. So with unis, choose the one. I chose it simply because, honestly, if I'm being honest, it was the prestigiousness of it. And I guess like the graduate employability and all of, I guess, the kind of benefits that come with going to a top like 20, 30 uni in the world. So that was kind of how I chose it. However, I'd also recommend really researching sectors, because although Melbourne Uni might be a top 30 university in the world, I know that their design sector is nowhere near as close as nowhere near as I guess like great as RMIT. RMIT is the best, I think, the best design school in Melbourne. So therefore, not only look into exactly what sector you're studying to choose your university, but also just, I guess, kind of where you want to end up. Just research into the programs, what they offer, and things like that. And then for your degree, just choose what you're passionate about. Genuinely, that's all I can really say.
Yeah.
Just genuinely choose what you're passionate about, and the results will follow.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just that's kind of the core of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
What knowledge from school do you recall and use the most in your degree, would you say?
I'd say due to the fact that I am undergoing commerce, I think it's definitely economics. I honestly think it is such an advantage if anyone is like looking to go into commerce at Melbourne Uni. When you talk to your peers, taking economics in high school, especially IB, made it so much easier. And I already had essentially 60% of the course kind of known to me, whereas my peers had to start from scratch. And that just set me up so well. And I think geography, honestly, it's not a very, oh, in my school it was quite common, but it's not a very, like, I guess, core subject in IB. However, I love that subject because genuinely it prepared me for essay writing, time conditions, knowing just kind of, I guess, how the world works and case studies and things like that I bring into, for instance, in my principles of management exam I had 2 months ago, I genuinely used a lot of my essay structure and my essay writing from geography in my university exam. So it's all about things relevant to your field. Like personally, I haven't yet to use chemistry and use, I guess, like balancing equations or anything like that in my degree. However, I'm still grateful that I learned it. So that's, I guess, just a message. Don't neglect subjects that you think that you won't do in university, because it's just as important to just have a wide range of knowledge. That's, I guess, why you take the IB. But yes, 100% using economics and geography were extremely helpful for me in university, and English as well, just learning how to write well.
How do you keep a good like work-life balance at uni?
Honestly, it's all about timetabling. That's genuinely the easiest way to say it. Because for me, I go into uni, I'd say get on your timetable as soon as possible, because the moment you wait and you think, oh, let me do my timetable in a month, all the good allocations are exhausted and you find yourself going, like, especially if you're a commuter, if you're on campus, not so much, because it's just, I guess if you're on campus, the environment is a lot more kind of just central to the university, and you won't have as much time, like, I guess, like trouble getting to uni to and from. However, like 80% of kids, 90% of kids are commuters, and they're going in from a location, maybe outer suburbs or some sort of suburbs that takes 30, 40 minutes to get to uni. So this year I had university 2 days a week. I went in for my tutorials, and I set up all my tutorials in the same days. So I had 2 days a week where I had university. I watched all my lectures online. If I was really inkling, and if there was a lecture in between my tutorials, I'd go to it. And if I had a real kind of like question or something I wanted to ask, I would go to my lectures. However, the recordings are substantial, and as long as you kind of pay attention and take notes and hold yourself accountable, it is you're able to, I guess, go to those lectures online and still get the same benefit. However, yeah, if you timetable for yourself, it can become extremely doable. However, if you don't timetable and you go in 5 days a week and you realize that you're spending, I guess, 4 hours for only a 2-hour class because you have to tram an hour in and an hour out, it becomes, I guess, very kind of demanding, and you don't have a lot of time to either work or to see friends because you're just so kind of spread out. So once again, this links back to planning. The more you plan, the easier everything will become. So in university, 100% timetabling is all about how you kind of maintain that work-life balance, but also just in comparison to IB, it's so much less, I guess, demanding, and so much less, like, I guess, during leading up to final weeks, I'd say, yeah, it is pretty demanding. However, IB, you have to learn 2 years of content. Uni, you're tested on 12 weeks.
You really split up your like time during revision. Like I would say, did you really split it up a lot, or was it more focused on one aspect of revision? Like, were you taking a lot of time in your notes, or were you taking a lot of time in practice exams, or did you really split it up into multiple different segments?
Yeah, I'd say it was very dependent on the time, that like how far out of exams I was. I'd say majority of my time, like I said, in that around 2 months, I was just making sure I was revising all my notes and constantly, I guess, just active recalling, testing myself on little questions, having a kind of note cheat sheet and giving it to my mom and saying, read off one of these notes and like let me recall it. Just kind of focusing on that. And I didn't really take too many practice tests that far out. However, as soon as it hit around a month out of exams, I was basically just doing practice tests the whole time. It wasn't anything too, I guess, like extravagant. I didn't have any crazy tips. I just did my exams. Then after the exams, took the questions I didn't know, put them in a separate document, answered them, so I knew for next time. And that was just, I guess, my methodology. Just 2 months out, 3 months out. The longer you are out, revise your notes. The closer you are, use the past papers, because you don't want to blow through your past papers 3 months out and then have to like redo stuff that you've already done, because that's just really not beneficial.
Yeah. How often did you access teachers' help or private tutoring?
I had one tutor, and it was for chemistry. I think that STEM subjects, if you're not 100% understanding them, I would 100% recommend to get a tutor, because they do help kind of clarify things. And that goes for any subject, really. English subjects, Spanish. Really, if you're struggling with any subject to a degree that you feel like is outside of your teacher's help and the time that your teacher can provide, 100% go reach out to a tutor. I feel like it's just really beneficial, because you just get that private knowledge that you can really answer questions that your teacher may not have the time to answer in class. So I had one tutor. He was very helpful. I only really appointed him 4 months out of my exam, just to answer questions I had about chemistry and other things like that. And then when it came to teacher help, honestly, personally, I didn't really go to teachers too much. I guess I was very independent within my study. I kind of took for myself to answer things, and I would go to my teachers, but at times I know that they can't be extremely helpful. I'm not saying that's a fault by the teacher, but just due to the copious amounts of, I guess, questions that get asked, they don't have like immediate time for just you. That's not what their job is. Their job is to teach you inside. So they're not like, I guess, expected to do that. And if you get a great teacher that does give you time outside of class and sets up meetings with you 100%, but I'd say I didn't reach out to teachers too much. I had a tutor for the subjects that I did kind of struggle in. However, other than that, I feel like there is kind of, I guess, merits in achieving things by yourself, and I guess using your own resources and using your peers. I guess if I were to say anyone that I used a lot within my study, 100% my peers. People, I'd say, well, I don't even know if this is a question you might have. Is there anything about peers coming up?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a question about
so
like
I'll save it. But yeah, basically I'd say use all your resources accordingly. However, don't 100% rely on your teachers, because they can't, I guess, dedicate you that enough time. So if you really want somebody else to help you who is kind of qualified, go to get a tutor. And if not, using their heaps of resources on the internet that you can look for independently, that I feel like would provide a very kind of substantial benefit to your learning.
I might actually just jump into that peers question now.
Yeah.
So do you really study often by yourself, or is it in a more of a group environment, like at the library or just?
I just think genuinely the biggest, I guess, benefit of the friends that I had were always just your peers dictate so much when it comes to you. You are, I guess there's so many quotes that say it, but you are who you surround yourself with. You are like the combination of the closest 10 people you surround yourself with. Those are the people who reflect morals that you like. Those are the people that kind of have similar ideologies to you because you enjoy their company. So the moments, I would say, this is a big thing that I always tell my students, when it came to studying, I would never study. So I have my best friend, and I have my IB friends, and I have my school friends, and I have many friends that we're all close, but I had a very, I guess, strong connection with people who I chose. We I guess decided together that we would be like study buddies. So like I personally never studied too much with my best friend. We honestly had a bit of a rivalry. And I would go more on people that you feel like you work well with. Your teachers always say it, don't pair yourself with your best friend, pair yourself with somebody that you feel like you work well with. And that's 100%. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Surround yourself with people who are better than you in a specific subject, who can benefit you. Because I always studied with, I'd probably say 50-50 when it came to individual and group study. I would go to the library often with my friends really close up to the date, and I'd just work on past papers because it just provides motivation. It's very difficult to have that intrinsic motivation every single day. And it makes it a bit more fun when you're just with friends and you're achieving things together and you're able to do past papers and speak to them actively about questions and stuff that you have. However, it can become very, very difficult. I mean, I always studied in Monash Library. That place turned into, I guess, just more of like a hangout at times than a library, because people were just going there and not, I guess, placing themselves in, like study groups that were actually effective. And so I'd say 100% take, find your people who you study well with and stick with those people, because they will benefit you beyond means that you can even comprehend until you realize afterwards. I mean, it was very, very indicative when looking at results. My friends and I all got very similar results, and other groups all got very similar results, because it was just how study went. So the people you surround yourself with are 100% extremely important when it comes to getting the results that you want.
Okay, so now moving on to tutoring. What made you decide to become a tutor?
What made me decide to be a tutor was simply, I think there's so much, people don't understand the weight of their ATAR and the actual things that it can immediately do for you. And I think that, well, personally, my brother was a tutor. So I was, of course, I guess, exposed to that, and he enjoyed it. He actually, like, he referred me to Apex. But people don't realize the benefit that a high ATAR can get you immediately, in terms of immediately once you get your ATAR, if you score a high ATAR, you don't just want to let that kind of sit and not use it, because that's just not beneficial. You can apply it, you can become a tutor. And the benefits that it is I work from my laptop most times. It's very, very rewarding as well. I didn't realize how rewarding of a job it was until I actually kind of did it and actually because you make connections with students and you see them grow, and you are able, you can see, I guess, their joy when they do better on an assessment, and you can see just like their dedication, how their dedication grows when they start to kind of actually enjoy the subject. So it is a very rewarding job outside of simply not only the monetary benefits, the pay, the compensation is very good and much higher than you get in a standard part-time job. Flexibility, I can kind of work with my students whenever I want. You do get, you organize it with them. And basically, yeah, just I guess the reward of it, just like the nature of the job. It's not for everybody. Just because you get a high ATAR, it doesn't mean you will be a great tutor. It is a very, I guess, personable job. You do have to, I'm usually speaking for 60 minutes straight. Like, it is very kind of demanding and very difficult, but the rewards that you get from it are very substantial. And I think very kind of like, I guess, like indicative of the work you put in.
Actually answered my very next question, right? And I was about to ask if you find it rewarding, and you
Yeah,
pretty much
no.
just answered it right.
No.
Would you consider recommending taking on tutoring to others? You kind of explored this as
No, yeah.
for everyone, but
so recommending tutoring for others, I think that it's a difficult question to say, because people mostly look at tutoring for the, I guess, like monetary aspect of it. Tutoring pays well. And I think that can sometimes become a driver outside of simply the passion that you have for it. And your students will not benefit if you're not actually actively engaged within the session, and you're not actually actively kind of dedicated to improving their mark beyond simply just the monetary aspect of it and the benefits you get from that. So I'd say I would recommend tutoring to specific people, but if you were kind of a straight academic and don't really fare well with teaching and don't really have kind of like a very, I guess, you don't really like engaging with others, I'd say maybe not. However, people can 100% change their outlook. You might not have been crazy social or crazy kind of, I guess, like willing to help others during your high school journey. And once you kind of, I guess, do it one-on-one, it becomes much more easier, and you become, I guess, more like versed to just how to do it, and you do grow as a tutor as soon as, like, me compared to when I started is a completely different like outlook in the way I kind of go about doing it. When I first started, I was kind of a little bit nervous. I didn't know exactly what to do. I was nervous of the results. I was nervous if that was actually beneficial, but you have to stick with it. And now a year after, I feel like I'm very, very competent in just being able to teach kids. And this is a skill that not only benefits just like your I guess like academics and just being a tutor in general, but also just the way you can kind of speak to people. The biggest skill I've learned from tutoring is I'm now able to conversate about basically anything for as long as I want. Like, I can speak for like 2 hours straight, because that's like what I do within English tutoring, especially. Math tutoring is completely different. I know my brother, he is always talking about how he loves math tutoring because it's just you answer a question. However, with English tutoring, it is a bit more demanding on, I guess, like the mental aspect, because I'm consistently, I guess, speaking and analyzing and having to come up with ideas. And it's a bit less kind of like intuitive whereas math is like blah, blah. So there are benefits, there are kind of negatives. And I guess like especially if you have a large kind of clientele, it can become quite demanding. For instance, this year I had 10 students, and both privately and with the agency. And although you think a 3-hour shift, not long. However, if you're doing 3 hours of back-to-back tutoring, and it's something any tutoring, 3 hours of back-to-back tutoring is, I'd say I'd take an 8-hour shift over a 3-hour, like an 8-hour shift of my part-time job than a 3-hour shift of back-to-back tutoring, because although it's beneficial and it's less time, it is very mentally taxing sometimes, because you are kind of consistently, actively, harshly using your, I guess, like brain power. So, there are benefits, there are kind of negatives to it. However, I would just, at the end of the day, I'd recommend being a tutor. I'd like, just a simple answer, yes.
Do you think tutoring can significantly improve a student's performance, like overall?
This is a very, I guess, like it's a question that honestly I'm probably at a different mind to. I think that,
yeah, honestly, just ask as honestly as you think.
Yeah, 100%. I think that yes, tutoring is 100% beneficial. However, a tutor cannot do everything for the student. Just getting a tutor is not enough to do well in the subject. And I think that's often a common misconception that students get. And the best thing to do is use your tutor to your advantage. The moment you just let your tutor sit and you come to a tutoring call and you're just like, let's learn something. So I think that there is a lot of benefit in actually coming to your tutor and actively, I guess, like building, because a tutor's primary role is supplementary. And therefore I think that it's best the way to best utilize a tutor is to come with learning that you do have questions about, or come with learning that you are intrigued on or don't understand completely, and getting them to help you on specific parts. Because the best thing to do, and the best thing I can see, and the thing that breeds the best results, is when students come with their work and we build upon their work, because that way I can personally cater my teaching towards their work. And I can personally use what they know and what they've written to actively build upon and show them, you might be able to do this, you might be able to do this. So I don't think it's simply enough to get a tutor and think, okay, now I'm going to do great in the subject. If you don't utilize them effectively and you don't utilize them in the right way, it might not even make a difference at all. However, if you use a tutor effectively and come actively prepared and ready for each session, it can 100% make a substantial difference on your mark.
Yeah. Okay. Last question, just summarizing everything. If there is one point that you'd like to drive home to anyone that's worried about exams coming up, anyone that is just a bit nervous about all of the pressure that's going into year 12, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would just say, well, like, you hear it often. However, I'd say number one, no. I'd say the one thing I always tell my students, the one thing I always tell myself when coming into exam is, you know what you know. So when you go into exam, you can't rewind time. Way to kind of get over that, especially in the exam period, especially in that kind of when you go into that exam, because that's when I felt the most nervous. I wasn't that nervous coming up to it, but when you're in that exam hall and you're sitting down in that before the reading time starts, you're like this is it. So you know what you know, and you can't change that. And then you just have to use what you do know. So it's very simple. There's like, don't fret about what you can't control anymore. Just apply yourself the best you can, and your mark will be indicative of, I guess, your just confidence in your ability. The more confident you are, the better you will perform. So just go in with that underlying confidence that you did revise and you do know the content. And just leave knowing that you did try your best. And that's the most important thing. As long as you try your best and put your 100% on the paper, then there's nothing else you can do. And once again, your ATAR is not 100% definite of where you will go and what you will do. There are so many pathways. I have a friend currently in Melbourne with me who didn't get the ATAR required to get in, and then 6 months later he's studying with me. So there are so many alternate pathways, and don't focus too much on getting the ATAR. If you get the ATAR you need for your uni degree, that's all you need. Once you're in your uni degree, your ATAR is not indicative of like where you will be, and you need half of the like, I haven't talked about my ATAR since I graduated, since I actually just applied since I got into my course, I haven't even thought about high school and my ATAR. So, and there's so many other pathways, even if you don't get the ATAR you get. So just focus on the present and take it as it comes. Don't worry about the future or worry about the past. You know what you know, take the exam and go from there.